Hello, sir. I welcome you to my podcast, and I'm really thankful that you gave me time to come ahead for this podcast.
Hi, Chandan. It's good to be here. It's always good to interact with people. It's always good to interact with students, um, and I know what you do for students as well. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks so much. So, for the audience, please go ahead and tell them about yourself for those who might not be knowing.
Okay, so my name is Samvit, and I'm currently a Marie Curie researcher working at the Tyndall National Institute in Ireland. I did my PhD in 2017 from Manipal University, and that's in India, Manipal. It's a small town in Karnataka. Don't confuse it with Manipur. That's a
Mm-hmm.
different state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After my PhD, I moved to South Africa where I did my first postdoc. I was there for 3 years. And after that, I got this quote unquote prestigious Marie Curie fellowship. And now I am in Ireland as a researcher.
So,
So
look.
I did my PhD in material science.
Mm-hmm.
I did my postdoc also in material science.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, technically, even though I'm still a material scientist, I am more of a photonics researcher where currently we're trying to develop nano diamonds
Mm-hmm.
for cancer imaging and therapy. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, you heard that right. They are diamonds. We can make
Mm-hmm.
diamonds in the lab. Don't
Mm-hmm.
don't don't believe what they show you on TV where a diamond should cost you at least 2 months of your salary. No, you can make them in a lab.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
that's what we do.
Okay. Okay. So as I have seen your profile on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
so you initially started as a JRF, and
Yeah,
then you switched your career and went for a content writer post, and
right.
stayed there for a for a period of time, and then
Yeah.
again came back to your research field, and then went ahead to be a postdoc. So how has
Yes.
that journey been? Like, you have changed two career paths, first from a JRF, then to a content writer, and then back to research.
Well, actually, the entire story is there in my different posts on LinkedIn and on Quora.
Mhm.
It's there in quite descriptive details, but I'll
But this
I'll
is
summarize
for
it
the
again.
YouTube audience. This is for the
Yeah, so I'm
YouTube
going to
audience.
summarize it for you
Mm,
once again. So basically, since I was 10 years old, I've always wanted to be a scientist.
mhm,
When I was 10 years old, an uncle of mine, he had gifted me Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time.
mhm,
Um, it was one of the most amazing books I've ever read. And that's when I realized that this is my future, that I want to be an astrophysicist.
mhm,
So since I was 10 years old, all I could think of was science, 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 science. I
mhm,
wasn't great at science. I was a very, very average student. Like in my 10th boards, I had about 90%, which is pretty okay. In my 12th, I had about 75%, which is, you know, it's nothing. In my bachelor's, I scored about 52%. So, I'm a very average student. But I was very interested in science. I was very interested in physics in particular, because I knew eventually that I wanted to do a PhD in physics.
mhm,
So you know how it goes. You do your 12th in science, then you take up a bachelor's in physics. When I was finishing 12th, every single student in my class, sat for the medical entrances or the engineering entrances. I was the only one who didn't. Actually, I
mhm,
did, but that's a different story. It'll go on and on. But bottom line is, I didn't pick engineering. I went for a BSc in science, in physics, from Calcutta University. So the next step was obviously wanting to do a master's. So I did my master's in physics from Bangalore. And soon after I finished my master's, the thing is, during my master's, or until my master's, no one really told me that to do a PhD abroad, say in the US, for instance, because
mhm,
that's the only place I knew you could do a PhD from.
mhm,
I had no one to guide me as
mhm,
to what needs to be done. It's good to have some research experience, some project training, some internships. So I
mhm,
had nothing.
mhm,
And my master's was a very theory-based master's. We had 4 semesters of just classrooms, classrooms, classrooms. We had a
mhm,
few practicals, but that was barely anything. So I didn't have any project experience. And it came down to such a point that when someone told me that you should write a paper
Mhm.
and submit it to a journal, I thought he meant to write an essay and submit it to a magazine. That's what I thought, because there was no one to tell me what to do. Um, so, but then I figured out that I needed some research experience.
Mhm.
And I contacted an astrophysicist from IISc in Bangalore.
Mhm.
And I was working there for about 6 months. And I was doing something which I had wanted to do since I was 10 years old. So I was like very excited. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be an astrophysicist. I'm doing an astrophysics research assistant position. But 6 months later, I fell out of love with astrophysics. When I
Okay.
got deep into the subject, I realized I don't like this anymore. It could be, or it could have been a lot of reasons. It could have been because the professor I was working with was very famous in his field, and I don't want to take his name.
Mhm.
He was very famous in his field, and he barely had any time for us research assistants. So we were mostly guided by his PhD students and his postdocs, which is really not what you want when you're starting out your career
Mhm.
as such.
Mhm.
Um, don't get me wrong, they were very good, they were very smart,
Mhm.
and they really knew their subject, but I felt that there was something missing.
Mhm.
So 6 months later, I quit,
Mhm.
and I I was teaching, so I was managing myself as a teacher. I was taking private tuitions. And then a friend of mine, he had founded this advertising agency.
Mhm.
And actually, that was another guy. So there was a friend of mine who was working for a startup, for an IT startup, where they were developing apps for iOS and Android. And they needed content writers. So he
Okay.
said, bro, you're good at writing. You write blogs and, you write very well. Your English is very good. We need someone like you. Why don't you come and work for us?
Mhm.
That's how my content writing thing started. And from writing for an IT company, I moved into advertising. So I was a
Mhm.
content writer for an advertising firm. And that's where I could be really creative because I could write stories, I could write screenplays, scripts, stuff like that. And I really enjoyed what I was doing. But I was still not doing a PhD. And
Mhm.
if you remember, that is something I wanted to do since I was 10 years old.
Mhm.
So it was always there at the back of my head that this is all, temporary.
Mhm.
And I used to look at content writing as a hobby that paid me a bit of pocket money.
Mhm.
Okay. That's how I used to look at it.
Mhm.
So I continued applying for PhD positions.
Mhm.
And eventually, it came down to two places. One was Manipal University, and the other one was the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in Trivandrum,
Mhm.
despite not wanting to do astrophysics because their
Mhm.
project was more on the, rocket propulsion theory, and that was something that I really liked. Anyway, um, so I finally got the offer from Manipal,
Mhm.
and when I spoke to my future thesis advisor, I really liked what he was pitching to me. He said that
Mhm.
we don't have a lab, so we're going to set up a lab from scratch. We're going to buy equipment. We're going to start making nanomaterials, and we're going to focus on two specific aspects. One is for purifying water, and
Mhm.
one is for making better, efficient LEDs.
Okay.
So I felt this had direct implications on
To
society.
somebody's life.
Exactly, direct societal implications. And I really liked the idea of setting up a lab from scratch.
Mhm.
So I said yes to him. And then I came back to the CEO of the advertising firm, and I was telling him that I've got an offer from Manipal. I'm going to be going there for my PhD. And he refused to let me go. He actually didn't want to let me go. And he had drawn up an offer letter for me and was paying me an enormous amount of money to stay back
Mhm.
with stock options and stuff like that. And it was a lot of money. But I actually told him that I'm not in it for the money. I really want to do my PhD because I want to live my life with no regrets. And if I didn't
Mhm.
do a PhD, that's going to be a regret. Saying no to your offer might hurt me. It still hurts
Mm,
me because it was a lot of money. Seriously, it was a lot of
mm,
money. But it hurts, but I have no regrets of turning down that offer. But had I
mm,
refused to do a PhD, that I would have regretted. So that's
mm,
why I quit the content writing position. I went back into research.
mm,
And once I got into research, that was the only way forward for me. So I
mm.
finished my PhD, then postdoc, now postdoc. And now I'm kind of in a transition stage where in the next year or so, I'd probably be moving into industry again, but it would be more into a research industry. So that's my story. Still a long story, but yeah.
To the half of the story, I could actually relate to myself. Like,
Hmm.
wanted to do science since the beginning, same thing as of
Hmm.
mine.
Hmm.
Started the journey as a JRF, same here with me.
Hmm.
Till the end of my master's, even I didn't had any idea how to write a research article.
Right.
Like I
Exactly.
was like, my first article was I I saw somebody's article. I made sentences according to my work. Like
Hmm.
if I have to write the same thing according to my work, how would I be doing that?
Hmm.
And just put
Hmm.
those sentences there, arrange
Hmm.
them, and then shown
Hmm.
it to my friend that, okay, this is what I have made. And
Hmm.
my gosh, he just shouted on me. Like what is this? What you have
Hmm.
done? So then he
Hmm.
told me all of those things that, okay, this is how you do, this is how you do. And that
Hmm.
has led to
Hmm.
so many things that now reached here.
Right.
So,
No, so at least in your case, as a master's student, you saw what a research article looked like. When I was a master's student, I didn't know what a research article looked like.
in
It was
my,
only when I
yeah,
started my PhD that I saw,
okay,
okay, this is
this
what a
is what.
paper is. Yeah.
So the next thing that I have for you is, you said that you did your PhD from a university, okay?
Hmm.
But PhDs are done from a university also, and
Hmm.
PhDs can be done from a proper research lab also,
Hmm.
which are affiliated to some university,
University. Yeah.
like all the
Yeah.
CSIR labs
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
affiliated to ACSIR. So that's
Yeah.
how we get our PhD.
Yeah.
My question to you is, what do you think is the difference in the research that happens in a university, that to the that to the research that happens in a research lab? Is there any difference, or are they the same?
Parameters, variables are all different. Like you might be in a university that has all the facilities right there in the department you're working at. So you don't have to worry about, getting access to instruments, getting access to tools, getting access to softwares. You might not have to worry about that. The same might be in a research lab as well. I mean, if everything is right there within, your department or within the institute, you won't have to struggle a lot to get access to things that you need. But at the same time, there might be universities or institutes that might lack these facilities. Then you might have to depend on external sources. It's the same for both cases. I mean, if you're doing a PhD, it doesn't matter where you're working from. You're pretty much going to go through the same things. There's a lot of luck involved because, as I said, you might be in an institute that is very well equipped, where you don't have to really struggle to find resources, and your PhD might just get through by. Or you might be in an institute where there is absolutely nothing, and you need to depend on external sources, and that might be a real pain. So I can't really say that there's a difference as such, because if you're doing a PhD, you're basically doing a PhD for your supervisor. I mean, the research is funded by your supervisor, and your supervisor has an idea for something new, something that is worthy of being funded. So it's still a PhD nonetheless, but what you might be going through might be different. And as I said, you can't really say that a university might be different or an institute might be different. But having said that, yes, I mean, a CSIR lab is a central lab. So obviously they might have more funding from the central government, or you might have access to better funding and facilities than, say, an institute or a state university where it is not really funded by the central government. In my case, I did my PhD from Manipal. It's a private university. Yes, it's quite famous. Um, but as I said, we set up a lab from scratch. We had funding from the government to set up equipment, to buy equipment. And my fellowship came from the university. It wasn't a lot of money. It's not the CSIR, JRF stipend that I used to get. I used to get the university fellowship, which is not a lot of money. But I managed because Manipal, the expenses are not very high. So it was still a project worthy of being funded, and we managed quite okay. Yes, we had to depend on, IISc for some instrumentation. We had to depend on IIT Madras for some instrumentation. We sent our samples abroad for some characterizations, but that's all part and parcel of everybody's PhD. I mean, that's how you collaborate and network as well. So yeah, no, I don't really think there's a difference as such. Given if we remove the luck factor, there's not much of a difference.
Good, good. So,
But as I said, you should not deny the fact that there can be a difference.
yeah, obviously there can be.
Research-wise or topic-wise, not really. But the other things, there can be a big difference. Yeah.
So, coming back to what we were talking about, till the PhD level, we never have even seen, in my case also, I can say, we have never even seen what is a research article.
Right.
So I want to know the story of your first research paper that you have published.
That I published.
How did that came through?
I went through about 15 rejections before I got published. And the final paper that got published was nothing what it looked like in the first draft.
Okay.
So it took about, how long did it take? About 6 months, 7 months, bouncing around from one journal to the other, getting rejections before it finally got published. Honestly, finally, when it got published, I was just more relieved than anything else. I was not excited, no nothing. I was just like, okay, it's done. I'm just happy that
It's
chapter
over.
is now closed. Yeah, that chapter is closed. But it taught me a lot. I mean, every single journal where it got rejected from, there were very good comments. One was related to the size of the article. Because look, okay, I'll be honest, I was my supervisor's first PhD student. So even he wasn't very well equipped into the, how do I put this? He wasn't really sure how to present work in a very crisp manner, okay, at first. So we had to work and figure it out together, which was really exciting because, as I said, because he had a lot of time for me and I had time as well. And we would sit together, trim the paper, decide how to, make the paper more presentable. I realized back then itself that there was just too much content to be presented in one research article. So we had to trim a lot of things. There was a lot of unnecessary information, which was not really necessary. So you need to figure these things out. And once you figure these things out, it's very simple. But it's always that first paper that teaches you how to go forward later on. So, and the other thing was when I was the one who wrote the first paper, right? And it was a mess. It was horrible. Even though I was my supervisor's first student, he was already a PhD. He had done several postdocs as well. So he knew about writing papers. So he said, your language is shit. Like, you cannot write the way you speak. Obviously, scientific communication is not the same, when you present a paper. So it took a couple of, it took quite a few weeks and months to bring the paper into the format that was scientifically acceptable. Okay. And then it still started getting rejected because a lot of people were like, It's not novel enough. There's no novelty in this and blah, blah, blah. And then finally, when it did get published, we were like, let's move on with our lives.
Got it, got it, got it.
Yeah.
I can also relate to so many things, but I'll not tell them
Yeah.
anyhow. So currently you are visiting researcher. In the
I'm not a
past,
visiting researcher. I'm a
okay,
full-time researcher
okay,
at the
okay.
moment.
So this is
Yeah.
what I read in your LinkedIn profile. So that's
I
why.
was a visiting researcher
Okay,
before in a couple of other institutes.
okay. And you have also been a postdoc student.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where the confusion comes. So
Mm-hmm.
is a postdoc similar to a visiting researcher, or is it a different on how it is?
No, it's not the same. So a visiting researcher is more like exchange student, let's say.
Mhm.
So say while you're doing your PhD, you get invited to spend some time in a collaborator's lab. Okay.
Mhm.
It could be within India, it could be abroad as well. So you are a visiting researcher now in that person's lab. The difference is, the person may or may not fund you, person may or may not give you a fellowship, but either way, your current fellowship is still ongoing. Okay.
Okay.
In my case, um, I was a visiting researcher in DTU Denmark and in Ghent University in Belgium while I was a postdoc in South Africa. So what I
Mhm.
had done was when I was a postdoc, I had built a collaboration with these two institutes and they expressed an interest in working together with me
Mhm.
and they invited me to spend some time in their labs.
Mhm.
And I had my regular position in South Africa. And when I went to Denmark and Belgium, they provided me a place to stay. So the accommodation was something which they could finance themselves. But I had to pay, sustenance and everything from my salary and from, I could get a grant from the government and I was able to travel. So I spent about 2 months in Denmark and about 3 months in Belgium. And this is how I was a visiting researcher. So basically when I went to Denmark, um, we did some material characterization. We did some brainstorming sessions with the professor over there. The same in Belgium as well. We were able to synthesize some new materials. I was able to share my knowledge so during my PhD, I had developed a new technique to synthesize nanomaterials and the group in Belgium was interested in knowing that. So I was able to share my expertise and we were able to develop a few materials together and we published a few papers after that as well. So this is what comes out of being a visiting researcher. Like you build collaborations, you visit a few labs together, you do some work together, and it ends up in a couple of papers. And that's the whole objective, building networks and collaborations.
Mhm. So this brings me to my next question.
Mm-hmm,
You have had so many collaborations till now, like the one you
mm-hmm,
just talked about.
mm-hmm.
So what has been your recipe for collaboration? Like how you approach them, how you talk to them, how you do all of those things?
You just send them a mail. So basically, say there are some, say you read you're doing some particular work in your field
Mm-hmm.
and you have gotten stuck because you don't understand a certain concept.
Mm-hmm.
So you do a bit of Googling and then you find this one research paper that precisely answers your question. So you see who the corresponding author is for that paper, and then you
Mm-hmm.
send a mail across saying
Mm-hmm.
that I am also working on something very similar. Um, this is what I am doing. I see that you are also working in this field. I think we could work great together. Would you be interested in collaborating on this particular project that I'm working on? That's it. And then in most cases, they would say yes, because a collaboration is always good for any institute. That's all you need to do. Just send the mail. explaining why you're sending the mail. Obviously, you need to tell them that you're working on this project. They are also working on this project. Your interests align. It's a lot like sending a request for a PhD position or a postdoc position. It's a lot similar, but you're not asking them to give you a job. You're just asking them if they're interested in working together with you because you have very similar interests. That's it. That's how you build
Another,
networks. And it's very important that you do build networks during a PhD. I must emphasize this because one thing that Indian PhDs do not do enough is collaborating, is networking. They go to conferences, they go to poster presentations and, they give talks and everything, but they very rarely take down contact details. And even if they do take down contact details, they very rarely follow up. Excuse me a
yeah,
second.
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Sorry. It's cold over here.
I will just cut this part. I'll just cut
Yeah,
this
no
part.
worries. Thanks.
Yes, yes. So it's
So
important.
yes, because when you go to conferences, even if it's within India, you meet a lot of top people in your area, in your field, and you do talk to them, you do brainstorm with them, you do share ideas with them. Always ask for their business card. Always ask for their email addresses, at least. Always ask for their numbers. You never know when they would be useful to you because they are working in a similar field as yours, which is very important. So, if someone knows some sort of a theoretical approach to your experimental analysis, then it's always good to have theory backed up by experimental results. So that way, this is, and Indians don't do this enough. I've actually noticed this. Indians don't do this enough. We should be doing this more often. You start locally, then you move abroad. So no one's going to train you how to do this. Your supervisor probably won't train you. You need to figure this out on your own. You can always approach your supervisor, but then I don't know how each supervisor is going to perceive these, because I know how, some labs and all that operate. So you need to figure this out on your own, and you need to build your own networks because it's your career. Eventually, one of these people might be the person who's going to give you a postdoc. You never know. So it's always good to network from the early onset of your PhD. And researchers locally or even abroad are usually very helpful in supporting PhD students.
Okay. I
Yeah.
didn't know about this. Okay, so this is something nice to hear. Another thing that I have observed in many of your posts and many on your LinkedIn profiles, that wherever you have collaborated, wherever you have worked with somebody, the output has also been shown in the form of a published research article. Like
Yeah.
from every project, you have always tried to bring out 3 to 4 research articles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are your tips to improve, or I can say increase the number of research publications?
I really don't like the quantity over quality aspects of research output. The thing is, it's something which we cannot avoid being in a country like India, where, the number of papers quantifies how good or bad a researcher you are. You should, it's always important to focus more on quality rather than quantity. But being a PhD scholar, I know that is difficult. However, um, the more the collaborations you have, the more is going to be your research output. Definitely. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Because if you have collaborators in a number of places, you are working together with a number of people on different yet similar topics. So when you're doing that, the time it takes for you to get results is minimized.
Okay.
Because look at it this way. Say, I'll give you an example from my background. I have a physics background.
Mhm.
And during my PhD, I learned about experimental material science. So basically, I learned how to synthesize materials. I used to do some characterization. I used to do, a lot of optical spectroscopy and um, electrical characterizations and stuff like that. But I did not know how to do computational simulations. Okay,
Okay.
I had two choices now. One, either I learn it on my own or I find someone else who knows how to do it and I get them in.
Okay. Got
Me
it.
doing it on my own is going to take time.
Obviously.
Me
Obviously.
learning to do it is a time consuming process because at the same time, there's somebody else whose entire PhD is on this single thing.
Mm-hmm.
So why not get that person involved in my project? I have some experimental outputs. I just needed him to do a theoretical simulation to see whether his theory matches my experiments. So I give him the parameters. It would take him about a week or 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
to do the simulations. He would come back to me and then we would discuss my output with his output and we would see, yes, it matches. And done within a month, you have your data.
Mm-hmm.
So within a month, you've come up with something which would otherwise taken, a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you collaborate. So the more you collaborate, collaborations improves the efficiency of your work output. That's how you increase the number of publications.
Got your point. Got your point. That is.
But at the same time, I would still emphasize the fact that either way, do not compromise on the quality of your work.
Mm.
Like
Like.
a lot of us in India, what we do is we will say, we'll have a certain set of data and then we would say this can be used for, I don't know, biomedical imaging, for example, because it shows this property. So this
Mm.
property is very useful in biomedical imaging. But we would not show it. We would say it can be used, but we
Mm.
won't show it. And we'll still publish the paper anyway. Yes, it'll get published, no doubts. But if you just did that little bit of extra, showed the biomedical imaging application, the quality of your work increases significantly. It takes a little more time, but that's
Mm.
the difference between, say, 3.5, 4 impact factor paper and a 10 impact factor paper or a 7 impact factor paper. Big
Mm.
difference. So you should always maintain your quality. You should not compromise on your quality, no matter how long it takes. Even if it takes about 2 months extra, so be it. It's worth
Mm.
the wait.
Mm.
Because eventually, when you're applying for positions within India or abroad, say you have about 10 papers in journals that have impact factors less than 4.
Mm.
Okay. And then there's somebody else who has just about 2 papers or 3 papers, but they are in really top journals. I'm not saying Nature, Science and all,
Mm.
but really top journals.
Mm.
Who do you think they're going to hire?
Obviously, the second one.
Obviously the second one, because 2 or 3 papers in a journal, like at least in my field, it would be like American Chemical Society's journal or American Physical Society's or physical review letters is way, way, way more important than someone who's in an Elsevier journal.
That is
So
one.
don't compromise on quality. Yes, when you collaborate as well, um, you might end up collaborating with PIs and professors who have a very strict quality policy
Mm.
and they won't let you publish without quality data.
Mm.
That works really well for you as well as for him.
Mm.
Yeah,
Getting your point. Getting your point. Okay, that was, I am also trying to, process all of those things that you have
I can
told
see
till
that.
now. but
I can see that.
but coming on to the next stuff, um,
Hmm.
you have been through so many postdocs. You have
Hmm.
even assisted those who are doing their postdocs. You have
Hmm.
collaborated with
Hmm.
those who are doing their postdocs. So I'm pretty sure there must be some things about postdocs, some facts that are not known to others in real sense, but they still do exist. So can you share some things like this with us?
I'll tell you a very unpopular fact about a postdoc. The unpopular fact about a postdoc is you're not going if you're looking for an academic job, chances
Mm-hmm.
are you won't get hired as soon as you finish a PhD. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why you do a postdoc.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the unpopular fact is you do a postdoc to get some money while
Mm-hmm.
you search for other jobs. So it's an
This
odd job.
happens. This happens. This
Yeah,
happens.
that's what we're all doing. So we're in a postdoc and then we're searching for other jobs. And your job during a postdoc is to search for jobs, basically.
It is.
You might not like it, but it is true. Your job as a postdoc is to search for other jobs.
Okay. That's very, very obvious and very, very difficult to digest. Some things
Hmm.
are very difficult to digest. And this might be
Yeah,
one of those about
it
a
is.
postdoc.
Yes, you do have to do some research. You are an expert in your field and you are expected to guide a few PhD students. And I mean, I'm doing the same. I'm guiding a couple of PhD students over here. I have my projects going on as well because I am funded by the European Union. So I do need to do some work of my own. But in the middle of all this, I'm still on LinkedIn. I'm searching for jobs. I'm connecting with people. I'm discussing possibilities with people. So yes, that's my job as a postdoc.
Makes sense, makes sense. You have spent so many years in the field of research. Like, from school you had this thing in your mind that you
Hmm.
wanted to do something in the field of science. So
Hmm.
my question to you is, what is your motivation for research?
As I said, it's something which I've always wanted to do. And I was really, really passionate about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it, the idea of doing something which nobody else has ever done before is something which excites me, which is why I'm still in it. And there are some non-technical skills that I've acquired over the years of my PhD, like the ability to adapt, uh, patience, the ability to listen clearly, the ability to, smile even though the experiment has failed, the ability to mentor students.
Mm-hmm.
These things have helped me become a better researcher because these are skills that you do need that, you know, you need as a researcher. Absolutely. So it keeps me going.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to, I think I've written one such thing in LinkedIn as well. The ability to adapt, in my opinion, is the most important skill you should develop as a PhD researcher.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you want to do in the first year of your PhD would be completely different from what you want to do in the final year of your PhD.
Very, very obvious.
There might be absolutely no connection with,
Mm-hmm.
one and the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is something which you need to accept.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The moment you accept this, you develop the skills of adapting to changing environments. And when you do adapt to changing environments, things just smoothen out and you are at peace. And if you're not at peace in your PhD, you are in big trouble. I'll give you an example. When I was in my first year of my PhD, as I said, I was focusing on water purification and LEDs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But before we started on the water purification thing, we were developing materials.
Mm-hmm.
So when my parents used to ask me, what are you going to be working? I mean, what are your plans after your PhD? I tell them that I'm going to work in a cement company because I thought materials, cement, that sort of a
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, okay, from astrophysics to a cement company, fine, okay. In my second year, um, when we started with the water purification thing, I thought I was going to work for a water purification company. Okay. Then like Tata or, one of those, you know, water filtration companies, Eureka, Forbes, AquaGuard and all. Third year, we started working on optical materials. So I thought I was going to work for an LED company, you know. Towards my fourth year, I still thought I was going to work for an LED company, but I thought I was going to work in more, you know, optical design sort of material companies where they develop instruments to detect more sensitive optical features,
Mm,
more sensitive equipment, basically.
mm,
So I thought I was going to work in a company like that.
mm,
Then in my final year, I read an article by a professor and article as a research article by a professor in IIT Bombay, um, where they had developed nanomaterials to cure cancer through alternating magnetic fields.
okay.
So they did studies on mice and they showed that there was about a 60-65% survival rate in mice using these nanoparticles, and the cancer shrunk and disappeared and the mice also survived.
Mm,
And that hit me like that, you
mm,
know? And then I realized I want to do something in the biomedical space.
mm,
So, so when that happened, I realized I don't have the skills to do any biomedical research, which is
mm,
why I wanted to do a postdoc where I can learn biomedical stuff. And
mm,
that's why I'm doing a postdoc. So you see, the fifth year was completely
mm,
different from my first year or second
mm,
year or third year or fourth year. And you
mm,
adapt.
mm,
You have to be flexible that way. You need to tune your mind in such a way that, you should know that things are going to change.
mm.
You need to keep learning. And while you keep learning, you keep adapting.
But I'm sure this process of adapting is not going to be so easy because
No, it's
the
not.
mind is used to something and then it
Yeah.
completely changes. So how
Yeah.
you told your mind, okay, calm down, you need to do this.
It's important to have a healthy work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There is this notion in India that if you're doing a PhD, you can have no social life, no personal life, it just goes out of the window and, PhD matlab ho gaya, zindagi khatam, that sort of a thing. But that's not really the case. For me, I knew that if I took my work home, then there is no distinction between my lab and my home.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no place I can look forward to relax and unwind.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me was an absolute no-no. I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a laptop at home, which was filled with CDs and movies. And there was not a single work-related software on it. It was
Mm-hmm.
just for me at home. So my home was my private space.
Mm-hmm.
And I would never bring work home. I would stay in my lab till however late it got, finish my work.
Mm-hmm.
If I feel at some point that I am tired, I'm mentally exhausted, I can't do any more work,
Mm-hmm.
I would stop and go home. Because if I can't work in my workspace, what makes you think I can go home and continue working? It's not possible.
Obviously.
Everybody says, no, I'll go home and I'll finish my work from home. I'll plot the graph at home. I'll plot the spectra at home. No, because your home is a different environment altogether, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So when you have that sort of a work-life balance, you are kind of in a position to take control of things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, when you're in control of your own research, your own mental space, it makes adapting a lot easier
Mm-hmm.
because you know the steps that you need to follow. Like, for example, um, you need to learn new things to adapt to the new thing. You
Mm-hmm.
need to learn new concepts. You need to learn new experiments. You need to learn new lab processes.
Mm-hmm.
You do it because you know that this is the way forward and you get it going.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be difficult. So you start in baby steps, small steps, one by one.
Mm-hmm.
That's where your patience also comes into play. You need to be patient. You can't just learn everything overnight. That's not possible. Be patient. Things take its own time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you need a place to mentally calm down, and that should be your home. Never take work home.
Because that thing actually gives your minds a little bit of time to relax. and
Exactly.
only then the mind can go towards other things where you are trying to bring it. Yeah, got it.
Exactly.
Got your point. Got your point.
Exactly. If your mind is calm, it can do great things.
Mm-hmm. Great, great, got it. Now the so I have this list of the questions with me, so that's why I'm
Hmm.
looking some
Yeah, that's fine. That's okay.
hugging down. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is that your work has been on development of medical devices. You have worked on that.
Mm. Okay.
um, I don't know how much because I don't know about all of those stuff.
Mm.
So what I want to know from you that medical devices are a part of research and they will be a part of research for a long period
Hmm.
of time because
Hmm.
that is something that which we want to make it a better place, and
Yeah.
that's why. But
Yeah.
what, according to you, are the challenges that we
Hmm.
face in the development of medical devices?
Okay. So medical devices is basically the final output of many, many years of research on a particular topic. Say, for example, you now have wearable devices, like your Apple Watch, for example. Okay. So your Apple Watch can now measure your heartbeat. It can measure your blood glucose levels. So basically there are different kinds of sensors which are incorporated into the little chip, and
Mm-hmm.
that measures a whole lot of things. Okay. So these are basically wearable biomedical devices. And nowadays, if I don't know if you know how they measure your blood glucose level, it's just a small little electronic gadget. They'll just tap your skin with it. It won't even draw blood. They'll just tap your skin with it, and they will show, what your blood glucose levels are. That is what we see now. But the amount of work that has gone into developing that small little gadget, years and years of failure, years and years of optimization,
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy to finally come out with a prototype that works commercially on a large scale.
Mm-hmm.
Things would work. And you were saying about the scalability of your toy project, right? It's one thing to make a thing work in the lab. It's another thing to scale it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this challenge is kind of universal throughout, not just medical devices, but in research in general. Scaling up from a lab is always a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go through numerous permutations and combinations. You're going to go through numerous failures or failed prototypes before you finally get that one final thing that works. So these are pretty standard challenges, but these are very pertinent challenges, even in medical device industries. That the material they make for, say, um, your hip replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's a specific kind of material that would have taken many, many years to come up with the right ratio of mixing all these materials together into that specific mold and shape and design that you now use for hip replacement surgeries or even prosthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of research, and it's what you see now is years and years of hard work, years and years of people who have invested their blood, sweat, and tears into getting that thing done. So these are, I mean, I'm talking about it from a medical device perspective, but these are common challenges in any research.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you're a software programmer,
Mm-hmm.
you finally come up with a code for, I don't know, um, detecting some kind of trace explosive device in suitcases. You've written an AI code, or even let's say COVID, for example. Okay, you use a chest X-ray, and then you've designed your AI code to see whether your chest X-ray contains COVID or not. Imagine the amount of code that might have gone into that, because AI is not easy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes time. I mean, these things take time. It takes perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I mean, be prepared to fail. So that's how I always look at it. Like in my case, I'm doing something no one has ever done before. No one's really used diamonds for, um, you know, cancer imaging or treatment for that matter. But I don't know if it's going to work or not. But someone has to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't know unless you tried.
Obviously, obviously.
There
I
you
will
go.
come to that part. That is something that I want to know from you, but I will come to that part in the
Okay.
later part. Because that is something that when I heard about it, I was like, okay, this is also something that
Hmm.
exists, but I will come to that part. Another
Okay.
part of your research has been on somatic cells in milk.
Hmm.
Please tell us what it is and what was that research and how did it end?
So that's kind of a side project of mine at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so somatic cells are basically bacteria which are present in milk. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
These are bad cells. They show that the cow has an infection in the udder. Okay. So basically what happens is it's a disease called mastitis. So
Mm-hmm.
mastitis is basically the infection of the udder. Um, when you milk the cow, the number of somatic cells that goes into the milk
Mm-hmm.
gives you an estimate of the milk quality and the cow's health. Okay.
Okay.
Um, you can have, I think the limit for somatic cells, at least in Europe, is about 150,000 cells per 100 ml or per liter or something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the exact numbers, but yes. So the higher the number of somatic cells, the poorer is the quality of milk, and you know your cow has an infection. It has mastitis. So now what we do is there's only one way to test the quality of milk, that is using chemical dyes. Okay. So there's a dye that they use that they mix into the milk. They shake it up and they take an image of it, and then the dye changes color depending on the number of cells in it. And then what they do is they throw away the dye and the milk with the dye. Now dyes are dangerous because they're mostly carcinogenic and they harm the environment. So we're trying to come up with an alternative solution
Mm-hmm.
using again diamonds, because diamonds are nothing but carbon-based materials.
Mm-hmm.
And we use these diamonds to evaluate or count the number of somatic cells in milk, and we use optical methods. So we have like a fluorescence
Mm-hmm.
microscopic setup,
Mm-hmm.
and we use that to count the number of somatic cells and evaluate the quality of milk. So that's basically what it is.
Getting the point. Getting
It's actually very simple. I mean, I'm surprised no one really thought about this before.
the point. So coming on to that, this part only,
Hmm.
you have talked so many times about nano diamonds and its
Hmm.
applications.
Hmm.
Now I want you to tell us what are or like what you mean by nano diamonds here and what are
Hmm.
the applications of it.
Okay. So nano diamonds are basically diamonds of nanometer sizes. Okay. So you can have, diamonds ranging from 10 nanometers to 100 nanometers, 1 micrometer, those ranges. And they can be made in labs. Okay. And you can make them through different methods. Is there a bug? Yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
there was a bug. Please tell.
So you can make them through different methods. Okay. The most common method is something known as a high pressure, high temperature method. So basically it's like a big giant pressure cooker and you heat it up to very high temperatures and you have some explosive device inside or explosive material inside, and the
Mm-hmm.
material explodes.
Mm-hmm.
And because it is carbon-based explosives, you get diamonds. And that's exactly how diamonds are found naturally as well, like under high pressure, high temperature. So we just do that in the lab. Once you get the diamonds, they're all carbon-based materials, and it's very easy to think about biomedical applications because every single thing is carbon-based. So it is biocompatible, it is very stable, it does not harm the body, doesn't harm the environment. So the applications can be quite a bit.
Like,
So what we're doing now is we're using diamonds okay, so diamonds, because of their crystallinity and their hardness, you cannot really do any chemical treatment to them. It doesn't
mm,
work, okay,
mm,
because they're too stable to go through any sort of chemical treatment. So what we are doing is we use high energy ions to bombard these diamonds to make them optically active. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So basically being optically active means they give you a, uh, okay, like your glow in the dark materials, like
Mm-hmm.
your, when you're traveling by road and then your road signs, when your headlight hits the road signs, it kind of glows, right? It reflects. That's how you
Mm-hmm.
see it very clearly. That sort of a thing. So those are like fluorescent materials. So
Mm-hmm.
we are trying to make our diamonds fluorescent.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to make them fluorescent in a specific wavelength region because your if you're doing biomedical imaging, the fluorescence needs to come out of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
Obviously.
point in the diamonds being inside it fluorescing and you cannot capture any light coming out from the diamond. Basically, we want the diamonds to shine light. Okay. If you take a torch and you
Mm-hmm.
cover your hand over the torch and the torch is on, you can see your blood and, a little bit of stuff like that, right? That's because your torch bulb is usually a halogen lamp. A halogen lamp has wavelengths from, I think, 400 nanometers all the way to about 1000 or 1100 nanometers. The region between 700 nanometers and 1100 nanometers is transparent to the skin. So it goes through the skin. And that's how you can see, the blood and everything inside, which is exactly what we're doing in diamonds. So we're trying to, make it fluorescent in this wavelength region that the light comes out of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So we do some sort of doping using high energy ion beams. And then we take some cells in a petri dish, we mix the
Mm-hmm.
diamonds with them, and then we take the images of those. That's basically what it is in a nutshell.
And then where are you planning to use them? Where are you planning to use this application? Like
So
this
we are
thing.
trying to come up with a, okay. You want me to go into technical details now? Okay. So basically what we're trying to do is try to identify cancer at its earliest stages. Okay.
Okay.
And the cancer which we are focusing on is the colorectal cancer, the stomach cancer. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, the stomach has a lot of bacteria in it, right? So this bacteria sometimes, under certain circumstances, it stops functioning the way it is meant to function. And and then the stomach gets, I mean, you have stomach ulcers, right? You've heard about stomach ulcers. So
Mm-hmm.
these stomach ulcers are caused by the bacteria in the stomach. It is a disease known as inflammatory bowel disease.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Usually, in a lot of cases, in most of the cases, it goes as it is.
Mm-hmm.
You take medicines, antibiotics, and it goes. But under certain conditions, this is the early onset for colorectal cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a direct correlation between the bacteria and colon cancer. We want to know the exact time that happens.
Okay.
The exact time inflammatory bowel disease becomes colorectal cancer through biomedical imaging.
Okay.
And that's where we use our fluorescent diamonds.
So how will they be able to tell? Like I'm just curious. Now I'm
Mhm.
getting curious about these things.
There are certain signals. So basically, once again, it's all about understanding the data that you get, processing your data, analyzing your data.
Mm-hmm.
That's where data analysis comes in. So there is always a difference between, say, a healthy gut, a healthy stomach,
Mm-hmm.
an inflamed stomach with just bacteria, and the early onset of colorectal cancer. There's
Mm-hmm.
always a difference in the signals that you get. There's always a difference in the data. So we
Mm-hmm.
try to optimize, or trim that data to the, earliest possible moment where you can say that, okay, this is the threshold point. Beyond this, you have colorectal cancer. Before this, you have inflammatory bowel disease.
So
You just
that
process the data that you get
so that
so that you know
diamonds.
that, okay, mhm.
Mm-hmm. Please, please.
Yeah, no, so that we can, or the clinicians can give the patient a clear picture that this
Mm.
is what is happening. These are the steps you need to take.
So you will be sending those diamonds in the stomach first, and
Hmm.
then take its imaging to tell whether it will be like this thing or that thing. Is it going to
Obviously,
happen
that
like
is the
this?
idea. Obviously, that is the idea, but these would be the clinical trials portion, which is way, way, way beyond our scope.
Mm.
So right now, as I said, since nobody has really done this before, we cannot directly go on test on humans. So we need to first do it in the lab. We do the Petri dish thing. We do it on cells. We see if it is working. You can get cancer tissues to work on in the lab. So we can do it over there in the lab. The next step would be to do it on mice. So we test it on mice. Then it would be like higher primates and stuff, but then that is beyond the scope
That
of this
is like
project.
a long process. That is going
Yeah,
to take
yeah,
a lot and lot of time.
exactly.
So anybody from the audience who just wants to work in this field, call him. Just send an
Exactly.
email to him
That's
as
it.
a part of this podcast also. So I got it point. Now I'm getting a little bit of idea.
Mm-hmm,
And these things actually quite excite me a lot, to
mm-hmm,
understand what all things are going on.
mm-hmm,
So coming on to the next aspect about which I wanted to talk to you.
mm-hmm,
As you know, we were also talking that about that part of commercialization of research. Okay, we
mm-hmm,
are doing the research good enough. We need to get grants and funding also out of it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, what is your take on this? Like, how has your experience being on commercialization of research?
When you say commercialization of research, for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so you basically want me to make my research into a product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you want to make my research into a product, that means there are different levels of, what is that thing called? TRP levels, technology levels. So there are like 7 levels of technology. So one is the idea, then is the basic lab research, and like that it goes until number seven. Number seven is where you form the company out of it. So in most of the cases, commercialization would be at a TRP or TRL, um, 3 or 4 stage, where you have at least a prototype in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you have a prototype in the lab, it's easy to get a bit of funding, or it is easy to get a funding if your idea is really something which is of commercial significance. Okay, our project which we are working on, the somatic cells thing, is a commercialization project. So
Mm-hmm.
we are funded by the Irish government to make the prototype, because the initial results it was a two round funding process. The first round, we were able to show that our idea works in the lab. So the next step is to make a prototype out of it and show that, okay, on an initial sample set, it works. Okay, that's how you do commercialization. Basically, if you want to commercialize your project,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a very strong commercial component to your research. Like, how exactly is your research going to be beneficial to society, or is going to change society, is going to
Mm-hmm.
help society in a good way? So
Mm-hmm.
once you have that,
Mm-hmm.
then it's easy to, go about thinking about the next step of actions.
Getting
Give
it.
me a second.
Yes, sure, sure.
Sorry.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine. So,
Yep.
okay. So, okay. So coming back, you have had a lot time of your research spent in the field of material science.
Mhm.
So, my question to you is, what is the future of research in material science as you see?
uh, Material science is not going to go away anytime soon. There's so much to do. Like, everything today, if you think about it, is related to materials. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you about the medical devices, the hip replacement thing,
Mm-hmm.
materials, the right
Mm-hmm.
materials, uh, aircrafts,
Mm-hmm.
materials,
Mm-hmm.
the right, aerodynamics and everything,
Mm-hmm.
materials, spaceships,
Mm-hmm.
materials, um, rocks on Mars, materials, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Obviously.
So everything is material science now. the thing is, what aspect of material science would you like to be working on? You can use material science in medical applications like what I am doing. Okay, you can use material science in um, optical materials, solar cells. You can have highly effective solar cells using the right materials. Okay, um, you can have materials for your more effective communication technologies, like photonic quantum computers, where you have the right materials, and then instead of passing electrons through your circuit, you have photons passing through the circuit. So it is pretty much a lossless communication technology, and it's super fast. So everything is materials based. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, the future of material science is the future,
Mm-hmm.
if you
Getting
know
your
what I
point.
mean.
Getting your point. Getting your point. Wow,
Smarter
this.
technologies,
Mm,
deep space exploration,
mm,
better medical devices, better medical technologies,
mm.
effective communication techniques. Everything is materials. If you break it down, you need a material scientist for everything.
Okay. So yeah,
Cements, paints
yes.
and pigments, all materials. Like you live in India. Like, so, I mean, my home is in India. So it's a hot country.
Mhm.
What kind of materials would you rather have on the outsides of your wall to keep the insides of the house cool during summers?
Mm.
Smart reflecting materials.
Getting your
How do
point.
you keep your windows clean without having to clean it all the time? So anti-dust, anti-water, materials. Materials.
Mm. Getting your point.
Think about it. It's
Getting your
everywhere.
point. It's everywhere. Actually, it's
It's
everywhere.
everywhere. It's the future.
So you have spent a lot part of your life in lab. You have
Hmm.
been like as you said that during your PhD you started a lab from scratch, and a
Hmm.
lot part of your life in lab.
Hmm.
So some of the very common mistakes that
Hmm.
researchers do in lab
Hmm.
management that you would like to share so that they don't do that same stuff.
Don't rush. The main thing is don't rush. Be patient. Rushing and being in a hurry never leads to anything productive.
Mhm.
Um, if you know, if you're following a certain protocol by the book, it will work. Even though it might not be working immediately, it will eventually work. So
Mhm.
don't rush into making things work. Don't rush into forcing things to work when it is going to work eventually. One of the worst mistakes you can make is, you know, being in a hurry. When you're in your lab, remember it's you don't control, I mean, the lab doesn't control you, you control the lab. So make sure that you have everything down to the book. You make a record of whatever you're doing. You make a note of everything. Important lab note practices is very, very important
Mhm.
because you just might win a Nobel Prize. You never know. Having a good lab notebook.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's how you should read up on the guy who won the Nobel Prize for discovering liquid helium. It was an
Mhm.
accident, and he wouldn't have guessed it if it wasn't for his lab notebook.
Mhm.
So he went back to his lab notebook to see what exactly he did, and then he realized, oh, there is some step over here. So when they repeated it, they got it, and he won
Mhm.
the Nobel Prize. So maintain a really comprehensive lab notebook. Make sure that you take care of other people who use the lab as well. I mean, you are aware that there are other people who use the lab as well.
Mhm.
Don't just leave things lying around.
Mhm.
Don't just finish your work and just, get out of the lab as soon as you can. Clean up, put things back where they were taken from.
Mhm.
Clean your workplace because somebody else might come and use it and you might contaminate their experiments. You don't want that to happen.
Mhm.
Um, what else? Yeah, patience, as I said, be patient. If something is meant to work, it will work. Don't force it into working sooner than it is supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, these are, be a good listener,
Mm-hmm.
you know. If someone is discussing their experiment with you, which is similar to what you're doing, listen to what the person has to say,
Mm-hmm.
because you might get some useful benefits or useful tips from their experiment that you could use in yours.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the main mistakes that I have made during my PhD, which I can just easily share with everyone.
Getting your point. Getting your point.
Yeah.
Now, coming on to the mistakes, the next thing.
Hmm.
You have assisted so many PhD scholars to get them where they wanted to be, like in the
Hmm.
terms of that, like, we have helped them. So I just want to ask you about this. What are the common PhD mistakes that you have observed in them that you would like to highlight?
You're talking about PhD students or PhD aspirants?
Both of them. Like for PhDs to or students, those who are doing.
For PhD who are doing PhD and for those who want to do a PhD.
I guess both. I'm sorry.
Bo- No, look, for a PhD student, make mistakes. That's
Mhm.
the best advice I can give. Just make mistakes. Don't repeat the same mistake twice. That's it. Make
Mhm.
mistakes. Make as many mistakes as you want, but do not repeat the same mistake twice. There's no way else you're going to learn.
Mhm.
So we all learn and grow from our mistakes during our PhD.
Mhm.
So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Okay, don't be afraid that uh, this might not work, so why bother doing it? What if it works? What if it turns out to be a success?
Mhm.
So you need to have that courage, and you need to be brave enough to accept the fact that yes, I'm going to make mistakes. But as I said, when you keep that lab notebook, that
Mhm.
really helps in avoiding repeating the same mistake twice.
Mhm.
For a PhD aspirant, huh, for a PhD aspirant, what mistakes have I seen PhD aspirants make? I'm not really sure how to answer that. Um, One of the biggest mistakes which I've seen in PhD aspirants is they try to apply for PhD positions without really understanding fully well what a certain research group works in
Mhm.
and how your background and your skills aligns with the group's activities.
Okay.
I still remember I've actually got a email from someone who's a civil engineer asking me for a PhD position in my group. I mean, that's actually that's the extremist kind of, most extreme sort of um, bad request that I've got. But
Mhm.
you get the point, right? I mean, you should know fully well what a certain group is working on, what are their current research focuses. They might have worked on several things in the past, but that's not necessarily going to be the same as what they're working right now. So
Mhm.
know what they're working right now.
Mhm.
Does your experience match their research activities?
Mhm.
If it does, do a full background study, do your own research, do your own homework, understand what their requirements are, understand what they do, how you fit into the group, then you send your applications.
Getting your point. Getting
So
your
as an aspirant, I think this is something which you need to really take care of.
point. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, coming on to the last part of this podcast, coming on to
Mm-hmm.
the last question that I wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
If you meet somebody who is just about to start his PhD,
Uh-huh.
just a new to the field of research and all
Uh-huh.
that stuff, what advice will you give to that person?
Enjoy yourself and celebrate small successes.
Mhm.
Uh, a PhD is a really tough job. It's a very, very tough gig.
Mhm.
So sometimes you would forget about celebrating small successes. Like your experiment worked. Go out for a coffee. Buy a
Mm-hmm.
small cake. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if it's even if it's even if you have to have it by yourself, have it by yourself. If you want to share it with someone, share it with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Celebrate small successes, no matter how small they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in a PhD program, success is very hard to come by. Okay, because as I said, I haven't said this before, but um, what I've realized is in 5 years of a PhD, like in India, you do usually do a PhD for 5 years. In 5 years of a PhD, you have about 4.5 months of failure and half a month of success, which is what helps you graduate. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's success is hard to come by. So whenever you have a small success, celebrate it. Go for a movie, go have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee. And yeah, and try and enjoy these little moments as much as you can. And always
Mm-hmm.
remember to maintain a very strong work-life balance. Very important.
Mm-hmm.
As much as you can, don't take your work home.
Got it. Getting the point.
Yeah.
Because that will make you more stressed as you are
Yeah,
right now.
absolutely. See, look, I would go home. I would cook myself a nice hot dinner or warm up some food, pour myself a glass of old monk, you know, watch the latest episode of, I don't know, Game of Thrones or Dexter or something on my computer, 1 or 2 episodes, and then I go to sleep. And then next
Mm-hmm.
morning I wake up, I'm fresh for a new day at work.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I come home late, my
Mm-hmm.
ritual still remains the same. Like if it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night and my brain is fried and exhausted, what makes you think I'm in a capacity to work from home now? I'm not.
No.
I stop my work, go
Mm-hmm.
home. I need my dinner. I
Mm-hmm.
need my that. I mean, that one glass of old milk really helps. Used to help me to unwind. But I don't want anyone to become an alcoholic. I am
No.
not supporting this. It
Nobody
worked for
should.
me. Nobody should. But yeah, so basically, cook yourself a nice hot meal. Um, watch something. Do an activity. I play the guitar, so I play the guitar for some time, or
Mm-hmm.
do something which really made me forget about the whole day that finished and just relax and go to bed completely at peace. You need to be at peace at the end of the day. You can't close your eyes and have 1,000 thoughts floating around in your head. That is for the next day.
Okay, so this brings us to the end of this podcast. This has been first time for me where I'm
Mhm.
completely listening because
Completely
most completely listening to the
listening.
guest
Okay.
because most of the
Uh-huh.
podcast of mine has always been a conversation, but this time
Okay.
I just loved to listen to whatever you shared, and I'm really
Okay.
sure others will also.
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to the end of the podcast, and I'm really thankful
Thank you.
that you came here. You gave me time out
I
of your
enjoyed this.
busy schedule, and we had this conversation. Though some parts are being cut, but this is good for the audience that they don't see it. Okay.
I'm glad it was useful.
So I'm really
I'm glad you
thankful,
enjoyed that as
sir.
well.
Thank you so much.
No, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed being on the show, and as I said, I always love discussing and sharing whatever I've learned during my PhD with students,
Mhm.
and this is a fantastic platform for that. So I've had a really good time, and hey, who doesn't like talking about themselves, huh? For more
Okay.
than an hour and a half. So
One
I
and a
was just
half.
talking about myself for 1.5 hours. So I enjoyed that.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for your
All
time.
right. Thanks a million, Chandan. I'll see you around. You take care. Okay. And what's the time now there? Oh, good night.
Mhm.
Bye bye.